Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing, and appreciate you guys swinging by the channel to watch today's episode. And guys, today we're going to be talking about some of my favorite lures to fish on riprap banks. If you watch many of my channels, I talk a lot about fishing riprap banks. I love fishing riprap, guys. I have caught so many bass off of riprap. One of my favorite places to fish. Gets a lot of fishing pressure, but bass live there all year long. And I've got 4 or 5 lures that I really like on riprap, and I'm sort of going to show you what those baits are and talk about the specific set of conditions on those riprap that those baits work. So we're going to get into that in today's episode. I'm also got a couple quick things before we get started. Just like to invite everybody to please consider hitting that subscribe button here to Advanced Bass Fishing. Much appreciated if you could do that. Also, anybody that wants to book an on-the-water lesson with me, guys, go to my Facebook page, Randy Blaukat Professional Angler, and shoot me a private message. I do my lessons here on Table Rock and Stockton Lake here in Missouri. And finally, guys, that we have the fall sale going on my Spinnerbait series sunglasses, RB2s and RB3s. You can get them over the next 2 months between now and November, 30% off, along with you get a free hard case with every order. And use the promo code RandyB with capital R, capital B for free shipping and handling. So thank you for putting up with the plugs there. Appreciate that. Okay, guys. Riprap is probably one of the most heavily fished structures on any lake, but it's for good reason. It's because a lot of bass live there. And one of the keys to be able to catch fish on riprap is you have to figure out the bait they want. That's the main thing about riprap fishing is riprap fish are very lure sensitive because they see a lot of lures. And based upon the condition of the riprap in terms of water clarity, the time of year, water temperature, wind, all those factors contribute to the baits you need to be using. So I'm going to show you some of my favorites here. But one thing I will say about riprap before we get started is that when you see a riprap bank, there are high percentage areas on it, like little points or like the parts underneath the bridge where it turns or any type of irregular features. You always want to hit that, but never forget that when you're fishing riprap, you need to fish all of it. You need every single inch of the riprap has potential to catch fish. So always, fish all the riprap when you see it. Okay, guys, my first bait I want to talk about here. Now, this is a really good bait on a riprap early in the morning. If you like right off the bat in the morning, there's actually 2 I want to talk about fishing early in the morning. One of my favorite ways to catch them on riprap, if the water temperature is over 60 degrees, is by fishing a spinnerbait. Fishing it real shallow up on the rocks. Megabass SD3. I'll link all of the baits here in my tackle warehouse link in the description of this video if you guys would like to pick up my favorite riprap baits here. But this little Megabass SD3 ripping spinnerbait, I'll burn it along those shady banks. I'll just throw it right up on the rocks and just reel it fast, just about that far into the water, and try to cover as much riprap as I can while you still have shade on that riprap. You don't need wind. Wind can be a positive thing, but guys, what happens a lot of times on those riprap banks is those bass move up shallow on the riprap to feed at night, and there's still a few stragglers real shallow from, if you get there early in the morning, they're still up shallow. I'm talking like that far off the rocks. And burning this little spinnerbait down those riprap banks can be really, really good, especially if you have water visibility, anything over about 1.5 feet or 2 foot. It's really good with that. Okay, the next one along the same lines there, as far as early morning, guys, is a popper is great on riprap. This is the Megabass Pop Max. A popper is my favorite topwater lure for riprap fishing. They love it. And there's 2 different times a year they really bite a popper good on riprap. One is during the post-spawn time of the year, like May and June. They bite a popper really good. And then again, like in, from mid-September up into early November. So you got, late spring and the mid part of the fall. Popper is great. Same thing as with the spinnerbait, guys. Concentrate on the shade. Run as much shade as you can and just fish it with just, like a bloop, 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 bloop. Try to, most of the fish are going to be anywhere between 1 to 4 foot off the bank. And one of the things that I do with it is I run as much shade as I possibly can. So I'll try to determine where all the riprap is on the lake that I'm fishing. And over the first 2 or 3 hours in the morning, I try to run as much of the riprap that I can that has shade on it. Because most of the time, if you're like on a bridge riprap, one side of the bridge will have shade on it. One side of the riprap will have shade, and on the other side of the road, it'll be sunny. So try to run as much shady riprap banks as you can with that popper and that spinnerbait both. Okay, now my next bait, this is sort of a cool water riprap technique, and that's fishing a jerkbait. Megabass Vision 110, my favorite riprap bank, favorite riprap jerkbait. And a riprap on with a jerkbait is really good in the wintertime and the early spring. So I fish a jerkbait on riprap anytime the water temperature is under like 55 degrees. A really, really good bait. If you've got anything around 50-degree water temperature, give or take a few degrees, riprap is deadly on any type of a bridge. In fact, I think Hank Cherry won the Bassmaster Classic down at Lake Gunnersville on a riprap, on a jerkbait on the riprap at Lake Gunnersville. I've caught some really good fish doing that. And one of the things about fishing the bridges with a riprap, cast a little bit further off of them, because a lot of times when the water temperature is cool like that, those fish will suspend out off of that riprap. They're not really on the shallow rocks like they are with the spinnerbait and the topwater I just talked about. They suspend out off a little bit. So I like to try to concentrate in that 5 to 10 foot zone with the riprap. I'm not really looking for any type of feature on the bank. I'm just going down the riprap. And most of the time, depending upon the angle of the riprap, I'm casting anywhere between 10 to 20 foot off the bank. Really good way to catch some quality fish. Next one, guys, Megabass Super Z Crankbait. This is probably my #1 riprap bait. If you say, Randy, you got one bait to fish riprap everywhere you go, it's gonna be the Super Z2 Crankbait. Cranking riprap with a crankbait is probably the most popular way to catch them. I have tried tons of different crankbaits for riprap, and a lot of different ones work. Say, for example, if the water's really muddy, a square bill can be good. But if you got anywhere between 1 to 3 foot of visibility, guys, try this Megabass Super Z2. This thing works like magic on riprap. I catch a ton of fish on it. I usually fish it on 10-pound test Seaguar and Vizex 4 carbon line. And I just target, I hit the bottom with it. It's like, based upon how steep the rock bank is, I just parallel it with the crankbait and try to keep in contact, deflecting off of those rocks, and just cover water with the thing. And again, guys, I'll link all these in the Tackle Warehouse description. And finally, guys, when the bass are not in a chasing mood, because every bait we talked about is a reaction bait, that's when I go to a jig. Finesse jig is my #1 slow bait on riprap. This is my Blaukat Power Finesse Throwback jig. Brown and purple, or green and purple is my two favorite things. And the way that I fish a jig on riprap is I pitch it to the riprap. So I'll get my boat like 20, 25 foot off the bank, and I'll make long pitches into the bank, and I'll just hop it down the riprap. I'm not casting down the riprap. I almost want to fish straight into the bank like that. So I'll work the riprap real slow and methodically, and I'll pitch this jig about every 5 foot down the bank, and I'll hop it anywhere between, say, 2 to 10 foot of water, and just slowly and methodically work down that riprap. A jig will catch them 12 months out of the year on riprap. A jig is the most diverse lure on a riprap as far as catching them in dirty water, clear water, in between, sunny days, cloudy days, whatever. You're gonna catch a lot of fish on a little finesse jig on riprap there. So anyway, guys, that's my advice for riprap. Those are my 5 baits that produce the most for me. Hope it works for you guys, and we'll check in later.